And before we begin here, folks, our acknowledgement of our traditional lands. So at Royal Roads University, we acknowledge that our campus is located on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. It is with gratitude that we live, learn, and work here, where the past, present, and future of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, staff, and faculty come together. So grateful to be here with you all today. And of course, the reason that we're here today, folks, is to discover our MA in Climate Action Leadership. I am so pleased to be joined by Dr. Robin Cox, who's the professor and the program head for this program. Robin, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thanks. Hi, everyone.
Awesome. And my name, folks, is Ariana Kinjerski, sorry. Slight malfunction speaking there. I'm an education specialist at Royal Roads University, so I'm always pleased to be here as well. We're also pleased to be joined by Idris, who is a McCall student. We're going to hear from them in just a little while here, so very pleased. We can hear a little bit about the student experience as well. And just a quick agenda before we get going here, folks. I will kick us off with a brief overview of the Royal Roads experience. We'll give some program information and learn a little bit about the student experience in the program. And then I'll wrap us up with some admissions information and how to apply. And if you have any questions or any comments throughout the session, please feel free to pop them in the chat and we can address them as we go. And you may be asking yourself, why consider Royal Roads when there are so many wonderful universities out there? I'd like to share with you, just to kick us off, some statistics from a recent alumni survey that was conducted by Royal Roads University. 93% of alumni say that Royal Roads has positively influenced their personal and professional lives. 92% of alumni say that they felt supported by staff and faculty. 90% say that we provided them with the tools and knowledge required for a leadership role in the workplace. And 89% say that we provided them with the tools and knowledge needed to be innovative in the workplace. And as an alumni of Royal Roads myself, I can confirm those are all true. Some good statistics for you. And I know we will be chatting a little bit about our online programs, but I'll still show briefly our space here. Just some photos of campus if you have not been. We have our Hatley Castle there to the top left, which is a place that many movies have been filmed. So things like X-Men and Deadpool. Pretty cool. We also have a variety of gardens and green space. You'll see photos of both our Japanese garden there to the top right, and we also have our Esquimalt Lagoon as well to the bottom left. And then, of course, we're going to be chatting about our online and blended learning styles here today. So just a little homage to our online learning there in the bottom right corner. And we're also pleased to be a Changemaker campus certified by Ashoka U, which is an innovative approach to education that prepares students as they address world problems, encourage others, and act for the good of all. And at this point, folks, we will get to the exciting part. I will pass it off to Robin, who's going to take us through a program overview. Over to you, Robin.
Thanks so much, Ariana, and welcome everybody. Glad to see you all here to learn more about the MA in Climate Action Leadership, or what we refer to as the McCall program, which also includes the diploma, which is a shorter program. So, sorry, my phone just started ringing. The Royal Roads is very committed to climate action and describes itself as a climate action campus, and some of that work is under review right now to refine. But one of the commitments at Royal Roads is to amplify and contribute to addressing climate change through our education and training, through partnerships and collaborations in education and research. And there's a robust climate action plan. This is being recorded, so you can check that hyperlink at the bottom there at some point. But this program is part of that commitment to taking action on climate, and doing so from an equity and justice lens, and bringing in very intentionally Indigenous perspectives and knowledges. So as with many programs at Royal Roads, we have quite a range of students coming from a range of backgrounds. Most of them are working, and they're working in a variety of sectors, including tourism, including people who are either Indigenous or non-Indigenous and working with Indigenous communities and companies, working in the post-secondary and non-post-secondary education sectors. We've had entrepreneurs, folks from very specific resource sectors, healthcare sector, city planners, grassroots activists, energy management, and folks from a variety of organizations whose primary role is climate action, things like ICLEI and local and regional and provincial, territorial, and federal governments. So we have a wide range, and that's both great that we have that, because obviously climate action touches all sectors. And it also makes the program experience great because you're really working with people from a real range of backgrounds and interests. And the program is designed to support that, both in terms of allowing a deeper dive, which we'll talk about later, into the areas of primary interest to a student, to yourselves, but also across those interests and really learning from each other, because climate action is at its heart collaborative and collective work. So some of the student stories that you might see now, these are compilation, but they do reflect the nature of the students that we bring into the program. In this case, Olena is a climate activist and is really drawn to the work through that activism, wants to, bring that passion into career. Activism isn't always paid or often paid, but that same kind of advocacy can happen within, paid careers. And is somebody who takes a master's program to shift over into the not-for-profit or NGO world. And part of her pathway, and because there are different options for students, is to complete a research thesis during the program. Marie is another example of a student who completed college diploma in environmental practice. So we have lots of students coming from an environmental background or interest, even though this is not an environmental program per se, because climate change is really a social, economic, political, cultural issue, and we're really looking at it from that broad lens and that intersectoral lens. Anyway, Marie wants to advance her current employment, and we get lots of students who want to do that, who are already working in the area, but want to kind of up the ante in terms of what they can do. Recognizing that many careers nowadays are bringing in a climate lens to their work, whether it's in government or not-for-profit, or corporations and companies. And so Maria is somebody who really wants to upgrade, is not totally sure she wants to do a full degree, so signs up for the diploma, which is that, a year or thereabouts, and then decides to flip into the master's. And again, we have a number of students that do that. The diploma is less of a commitment in that way. And for some students is a way of testing the waters, seeing how they do with graduate work, and then deciding or not to go into the internship or into the master's. And for this story, Marie takes the internship. So there's the thesis option, there's an internship option, some electives, and then there's the route that our fourth story is about. Brian, entrepreneur, comes from the hospitality sector. We've had a number of students who come from the hospitality sector, interestingly enough, really is committed to doing good things in the world and making the sector that he works in greener and more adaptive, and thinking about circular economies, etc. And takes a master's program, and instead of doing a thesis or an internship, uses our experiential learning course, which is a very flexible course, to design a consulting plan that he can then take into his work context. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of the kinds of students that we have and the kinds of pathways that those students can take. As Ariana said, this program is delivered online, and that was an intentional decision. It's a disappointment to some students because of not coming to campus, although some still come to the campus. We can chat about that. But it's a decision that is partially to reflect the nature of the program, climate action, and as we know, air travel and any kind of travel, but air travel in particular has quite a large carbon footprint. So avoiding that, and also the expense of coming. So we've had many students say, well, I wouldn't have been able to take the program if I'd had to come to campus because of my work commitments, my family commitments, and because of the cost of it. And as we know, Although flying can sometimes be cheap, Victoria has become a very expensive place to be, including for those who are just here temporarily. The program begins with a learning intensive. It's a 10-day full-time experience online. And that may sound daunting, and Idris, the student that will be speaking with us later, will talk to you about his experience of online, because I will say Royal Roads online is very different than a lot of online experiences that people have had. Online can be very flat and impersonal, and the online experience in the McCall program is not that. It's very dynamic, and this learning intensive is very dynamic. You're not on the screen all day. Sometimes you're doing reading and then coming back into a synchronous session, and then going off and doing some project work and coming back in. But it's a full-time commitment for that first 10 days. And then at the end of the program, the final learning intensive is designed more like a conference. And again, it's got workshops, it's got panels, it's got a range of activities. It aligns typically with, or for the last 2 years, it has aligned with Royal Roads Climate Week. So there are also activities on campus if somebody lives locally or decides they want to come, and we make that a possibility as well. So online, experiential, and open learning are kind of the key principles of the learning experience in the McCall program. What that means is there's a lot of flexibility in the online environment in the sense of timing. It's not a correspondence course. You know, you are doing things in time with your colleagues, your peers in the course. But the time you spend in synchronous sessions where you have to show up at a specific hour is relatively limited, other than the learning intensive. And most of your time is spent in the asynchronous environment. Now, you might be connecting with a teammate from one of your peers, or doing reading, working on assignments, etc. So it's about a 15 to 20 hour a week commitment, but also quite flexible. We use a Moodle as the learning management system. That's our primary learning management system, but we also offer our students WordPress sites, their blog sites, because many of the courses that you'll take will have blogs or those kinds of assignments in them. And what that allows you to do is start building a portfolio of work that you can share publicly. You can share it publicly during the program through WordPress, but it also means that you can build a site, and at the end of the program, copy the site. It's very easy to do, into your own WordPress instance or some other platform. And you already have a professional portfolio underway that you can share with employers or to increase your profile, etc. And then finally, like any university, we have a support desk, and we have a great computer help desk that supports students. We also have great counseling and career advice centers through student services, very active. And I encourage all students who come to Royal Roads to really take advantage of that, because they're free services and they're really professional services to support you being successful during your time here at Royal Roads. And then, of course, library with access to all kinds of databases. So those are kind of the technical sides. The program really is designed to support a range of people, as we've said, from a range of sectors, integrate a climate lens into their work, and get a foundation in some of the core ideas, concepts, and theories of climate action, both climate adaptation, which is about adjusting to minimizing the risks and impacts of climate change that we're already feeling, with increased wildfires and floods and extreme weather events. And at the same time to hopefully, within that context, build resilience, both in a personal and resilience at the community and social level, so that we are collectively better prepared for those impacts that are already locked in and are increasing over time. And also for areas of climate mitigation, which is really about reducing emissions. So if you take the program, will get foundation in climate science. It's a course designed for non-scientists, so don't freak out about that. It's a great course. It's a tough course, but it really gives you a foundation in the applied nature of climate science. So you're not going to become a climate scientist, but understanding how to work with climate models and projections, what they are, where the limitations are, how to talk about them and use them. Skills in climate communication. And I will say climate communication is probably one of the biggest areas of climate action, being able to communicate across professions, communicate with people and communities and organizations, and really hone those skills. You'll get a foundation in climate risk and resilience assessment and planning, also a critical area in climate action, being able to work with entities, whether they're government or non-government, corporations, businesses, to really understand how to assess their risks in terms of climate impacts, how to assess their own carbon footprint, and then how to plan forward with that. You'll get some grounding in the business of climate action. And the reason that's there is because you're often in a position when you're working in an organization of having to argue for why this is good for a business to consider climate change. So how to build an argument, a business argument for climate action. There's a foundation in other skills, design thinking and change leadership, again, which is huge. So you'll see here in the bottom, there's a lot of work to across courses, across the program, to build your literacy in climate change, climate adaptation, climate resilience, Indigenous knowledges and perspectives. The program starts off intentionally with a focus on Indigenous knowledges and perspectives on climate for the first chunk of the learning intensive. You'll also get some grounding in research and understanding how to read research and how to do research. Things like building in climate lens to decision making and knowledge mobilization, etc. So there are some strong interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary focuses within the program to really give you a good grounding in a combination of areas that set you up for a variety of jobs. Like all the programs at Royal Roads, it's a cohort model, and cohort model learning is not always the experience in universities. It's really you're going through the program with a bunch of peers, people who you become typically quite close to, and who come from a range of backgrounds, geographic locations, etc. And that social learning experience is, the research demonstrates as the best way to learn, but it also provides you with a network when you graduate. So you're already building that network. Our learning is very student-centered. It's open in the sense that we try and use and really only use resources that don't cost you money. So you have access to resources through the library, but we also use other Creative Commons licensed resources. So there are no additional fees or charges for resources. We have a strong social justice and equity lens in this program. It should be a strong focus in all climate action, really looking at how we support reducing risks and impacts for those most vulnerable. And we know that the impacts of climate change are not distributed equally, nor is the problem being contributed to equally. So that's a key part of us. And a lot of opportunities for hands-on experiences through assignments, developing consulting reports or developing reports on risk for an organization, etc. So we try and make it as practical as possible within a graduate education model. As I mentioned earlier, there are different pathways in this program. And again, this is really about providing opportunities for students to really do a deeper dive in areas that are of interest to them. Climate action is very broad. It covers so many different areas. And really, we say every job is a climate job in the sense that every job, every business, every government is going to be both impacted by climate, is going to be asked to think about climate and their own carbon footprint. And so having these different pathways provides students with options and greater flexibility. You can ladder into the program with some pre-existing credits and use those towards your degree for the second year. That includes a climate adaptation micro-credential that is offered through continuing and professional studies at Royal Roads, graduate certificates that are offered at Royal Roads. We've given an example here, but there are other graduate certificates that you can take or may have already taken, and if they are assessed to be relevant, can count towards credits in the second year, as many as 9 credits in the second year, which is a significant chunk. And that also, prior learning and assessment, something we call PLAR, is a way of looking at your existing experience, professional experience, work experience, volunteer experience, and again, assessing that to see where it's relevant and where it could be counted towards your second year optional pathways for credit. So that's a nice option to think about, that you are seen to be people with experience and with knowledge that you bring in. And where possible, we try and acknowledge that, recognize it, and support you in bringing that into the program for credit. There's a graduate diploma, as I mentioned earlier. It's an 18-credit graduate diploma. It provides a pathway into the master's program. So some students take it as a sort of, I think I want to do a master's, but I think I'll start here kind of thing. And you can transfer that into the master's directly. And then if you decide to do the master's either through a diploma or straight on, you're completing the 2 years, slightly over 2-year degree. There are options that I've already mentioned, the internship option, which allows you to get some work experience in an area that you may not have work experience with this climate lens. You can do a thesis research project. So again, you get to do a deep dive on a question that is pressing to you, about anything to do with climate change. We've had students focus on architecture and climate and develop curriculum for municipal governments, et cetera. So there's lots of different options with thesis. And then the customized portfolio allows you to do a bunch of electives, 3 electives, or you can do a graduate certificate. So you're really getting 2 credentials when you graduate. And then an experiential learning option that allows you to basically, in collaboration with myself or another faculty member, design your own learning and decide what you want to do, where you want to do reading, where you want to do perhaps a community project or a project for an organization. That's not a thesis, but is also something very practical. So those options really allow, credential pathways really allow for you to tailor your program to your own specific interests, as do a lot of the assignments within the required courses. Before well, actually, I see Idris, you're here. So I'm just going to go through this slide quickly, and then I'm going to introduce Idris so he can chat with you a little bit. I won't go through all these courses. You can find them online, and if you have questions, you can also ask them at the end of the webinar or afterwards, etc. Reach out to us. It begins with that learning intensive that is part of, well, this is actually the second year, but it is a learning intensive for year 1. And then and in year 1, again, you do that learning intensive, you do a course in climate communication, climate science, climate risk and resilience, the business of climate, and climate change leadership. And in the second year, this sort of demonstrates the pathways that you have, the various pathway options that you have, whether you're doing a thesis or professional portfolio or internship. So before I go on, perhaps we can stop the slideshow and introduce Idris, who is a current student in our program. Hi, Idris. Idris and I were chatting during one of our webinars, and he was talking about his experience in the program. So I invited him to the webinar to share a bit more about his experience, both generally and then specific to the online experience, because we know a lot of students hear about online and think, ugh, I'll be isolated, I'll be alone, it'll be boring as watching paint dry. And that's really not what it is. So Idris, over to you.
Thanks so much, Robin. And thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be speaking with you all. So I'm currently enrolled in the Graduate Diploma. And one of the cohort, in fact, was, egging me on. It's like, when are you going to decide what you're going to do next year? And because they're already in the master's program, which sort of speaks to the nature of what happens with the cohort. Once you you become almost like a second family in some cases, because you create a learning community of a different sort. And I have had experience in other university coursework where it's very much left to your own devices. You have, asynchronous work that is expected, some lectures that you will play at your own time. There are deadlines that you have to meet, but a lot of it is sort of left to you. And there isn't, I mean, there are students there, but the interaction isn't, let's just say, it doesn't feel very human. So there are opportunities for you to interact on text or through, a particular platform that they have at the university, but it can feel a little isolating. This is not that. This is a very different model, and it certainly feels that way because when you're in the throes of the intensive, as I was in May of this year, um, and the coursework will feel like a bit of a browbeat, but what is happening all through that is you are, absorbing and following the calendar, but all the while you're having your learning community sort of build itself up from within. And it becomes a really powerful experience because when you come out of the learning intensive, you just realize you have an entire league of people, professionals, all with different disciplines, all coming from across the world as far as, Asia and further on as our cohort is. And you will find that your learning community becomes a vessel. And that is unlike anything you'll experience. Now, don't get me wrong, the discipline and the reason we're here is why we're here, and that is to follow our own drive within this discipline to move the needle and to move the path forward for people, planet, and otherwise. But the learning community itself becomes a vessel that helps you along the way. It's a place for you to build, to ideate, to lean on, and to be supportive. And that's one of the things that I've found a place for myself in the cohort is that I'm often a person that people can come to. And there are others that people will be the ones that go. So you do find that your community becomes its own breathing entity in that process. That's a really powerful thing to have in your pocket as you're going through the rigors of maybe communications if you're not a communications person, or science if you're not a science person, or risk assessment if you're not a risk assessment person. There's a lot of disciplinary pieces, or even transdisciplinary thinking, which is a massive word and a very difficult one to wrap your head around. I struggled with it in the learning intensive myself. I feel like I'm only beginning to get the feel of that now, and it is such an empowering move to be able to walk through that, trajectory with your cohort and with your instructors to make that happen. And with like library services as well, I've gotten on a very personal connective level with our librarians because you need them. The rigors of academic work for people who haven't necessarily been in academic work for a long time, that can feel intimidating. And you have resources at your back within the university. And that's one of the things that I think really allowed me to be like that Marie in the avatar in the presentation, where I came in thinking, I don't know that I really have the stones to do this yet. So maybe I'll take a shot at, the diploma, see how I do. If I make it through, then maybe I can think about, the master's later. But like I said, the cohort now is the one egging me on to move forward. They're just like, you got this, like, let's go, which is not what I expected. Do not expect the university to be able to bring that kind of experience for its students. So I feel honored to be able to speak to that here today as a student at Royal Roads, and to be able to build my skills and disciplines that do feel distant but don't feel unattainable. And a lot of that is because of the power of cohort and community.
Thanks, Idris. And the other thing I've noticed in your cohort, but in all cohorts really, is the other thing that happens is that people have different skills. So someone's great at technology and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, he'll help me, they'll help me, with this PowerPoint thing, or somebody else is great at graphics, or somebody else is great at, synthesizing readings, etc. So there's a real blend of skills that come to bear. Is that follow your experience?
Absolutely. And there are people who have, in particular, who have had a lot of academic experience that I've been like, I don't know how to navigate this. How do I navigate, 19 readings in 2 weeks? What do I need to do? I know there's sheets on this and that sort of thing. Like how do you really do it? And they will talk to you about that, and they will support you with, helping you set milestones for yourself, and find ways of really not just shortcuts. Like it's not about shortcuts. It's about, how do I build a practice? How do I understand what the mechanics of this are? If I don't have scope of it, it's like, make me understand this. How do I understand it? Because the learning intensive, there was a lot of that. I have to be honest. Like there were points where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, how do I do this? But the thing is, it was coming out of it, and with that first big research paper, and it was like, okay, I need to wrestle through all of these pieces. And that's what synthesis means. The synthesis of developing a response to my own thinking, and putting that in an academic frame. What does that require? What does that really look like? And that for me was transformational, was to be able to have a community of people with skills that I could lean on at certain particular points, and then pull the things that I need. So I had the tools ready whenever I needed them. And now, being in the footing that I have with coming into risk assessment, coming through the sciences, being a communications professional, now I know how I can be of aid. And that's a very powerful place.
Yeah, thank you. Idris, can you stick around?
Sure.
Cool, because I'm sure people will have questions. Maybe, Ariana, we can just go back to the slideshow, and then I want to leave time for questions in case people have them. Just to talk a little bit, I mean, Idris is coming from a communications background. Who knows if he'll stay in the communications or do something else? Like we said, people are coming from very many different backgrounds. What we have noticed, I'm not going to speak to every point in this slide, but what we have noticed since the very early days of designing the program, there has been an explosion of jobs that are either climate specific, or are looking for somebody to bring in a climate lens into their work and professions. So there are very specific needs in the financial sector, investment policies, and being able to report out on GHG emissions, etc. There are, and we have students coming into the program from this, folks with more of a focus on mitigation and energy systems, and really looking at that side of the equation. A really large and growing number of jobs that are looking on the adaptation side, because, as I said, climate change is, even if we stopped every carbon emission, every greenhouse gas emission tomorrow, there are already things locked into the climate that will continue to create climate-related impacts. And of course, we have not yet stopped greenhouse gas emissions. So the impacts of climate change are increasing. And so businesses, organizations, institutions like Royal Road, governments at all levels have to think about, what does that mean? We've just, for example, finished a campus-wide climate risk assessment that looks at that and then talks about adaptation and what we need to do. So there's lots of work there. There's lots of work on capacity building activities, whether that's increasing climate literacy in K-12, or bringing in climate literacy into various professions. I'm just in a project right now working with planners and engineers and accountants. There's one other, landscape architects, who are all working with us to redesign their competency frameworks, the things that say what skills and knowledges you need to be a professional, to incorporate climate and a climate lens into those competency frameworks. So there's an increasing number of jobs, and as you'll see there, flood risk alone is estimated to result in an additional 25,000 jobs directly and another 12,730 plus jobs indirectly by 2030. So this is, unfortunately, I guess, for us as a planet and as a species, growth area, but there are a lot of jobs and a lot of places where you can make a difference. This is another slide that, again, just says more or less the same thing, but some very specific examples of jobs, you know, climate adaptation specialty. We just went in and looked, scraped LinkedIn on at a particular time to look for these, but City of Victoria, climate adaptation specialist, a greenhouse gas project analyst with College NAIT in Alberta, climate reporting manager, climate career portal mentor, you know, in a resource sector, working with the insurance industry, working with financial, like Coast Capital Savings, etc. So there are engineering firms. So there are a lot of different jobs in a lot of different sectors that are looking for folks that bring in a range of skills that include an understanding of climate change and how to act on climate change. So before we go to, well, Ariane, how do you want to do this? We've got a bit of time. We could open up for a little bit for questions now and then go to how to apply. Does that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's just see, are there any questions for myself or Idris right now before we talk about how to apply? And you can plant those in the chat or raise your hand. I see one in the chat. For the internship model, would our partner? So internship, great question. We have an office. Maybe let's just stop the slides and I'll stop myself with giving you lots of time to do the how to apply piece. We have a work integrated learning office that supports students. So you take a prep course, a not-for-credit prep course that allows you to really think through what kind of internship you want, because you know, you want an internship that has meaning to you. We do help with that. Students are expected to find their own internships. However, they're not just like tossed out and say, find one and let us know. The prep course spends quite a bit of time helping a student think through the kinds of places they might apply, how to apply successfully, how to describe what they're going to bring to that organization as an enticement for an internship, or, you know, to really meet their needs and the students' needs. I also get involved in that where I can. You know, I hear about opportunities. So you definitely have support to find that internship and to find the right fit. And we've had students working with a government, as I mentioned earlier, designing through their internship, they were designing curriculum for municipalities that they are going to continue working with that organization to roll out across Canada. We've had students doing internships with specific outreach organizations working with refugees and recent immigrants to help them understand a bit more about climate. So there's quite a range, and you do get support with that. Are there other questions about the, let's see, oh, we've got a link in the thing for that work integrated learning. Are there other questions that people have for myself or Idris, who's in the program? It's a real great opportunity to learn from somebody who's very recently started the program and, you know, is immersed in the decision about whether to carry on. Same person, Mr. Leung. Hi, Idris. May I know approximately how many hours you used for the lecture study and assignments for the diploma program? So how many hours a week? We say about 15 to 20 a week. I don't know if that's accurate, Idris. Does that ring true for you?
I would say that's pretty close. I think if I'm being completely square with you all, it's a safe space, I hope. The science classes will probably demand a little more. Simply because some of if you don't have a science background, some of the technical documentation will require second and third readings. In my case, it's sometimes fourth. But that comprehension is important because the rigor is critical. So you do spend a little bit more time on where you may feel you may not have complete disciplinary understanding or knowledge. You may have to overshoot a little bit of that time. But generally
Yeah,
speaking, of 15 to 20 hours a week, I think is a pretty safe bet.
yeah. And it also is going to vary from course to course depending on your background, right? So for you, depending on your background, but also, you know, life and commitments and all that sort of stuff. So some people spend less time than that, and some, you know, for a variety of reasons, but maybe because it doesn't take them as long, they're faster readers. For some people will do sort of the minimum reading, some people will do a lot of the additional reading. You know, so part of it is, it depends on your own learning style and learning goals. Um, you know, everyone has to do the assignments and is expected to participate fully, but the level of participation really varies depending on your own goals and your own background and your learning styles. So the 15 to 20 is an average. And as Idris has said, it may fluctuate depending on the course and depending on you as a learner, and depending on what else is going on in your life. There may be times where you think, okay, bare minimum, I've got a lot going on, or times where you go like, I love this. I want to read everything and I can't stop reading and I'm going to read some extra or do some extra or whatever. So that also varies over the course. Other questions? Anyone have a question? How many students are in a cohort? How many students are in your cohort? Idris, do you know? 12?
13, 12, 12,
12
yes.
or 13? Average, our cohorts are relatively small. They're usually around 15 in that vicinity. So there's not huge cohorts. The graduate work, you know, we at times have larger and some programs have larger, but it's a nice size because you get to know people and you get to, you know, spend time pretty much with everyone in your cohort in different team formations and in different dimensions of the course and the program. So that, yeah, that's the average. Other questions or thoughts? Interest, while we're seeing if anyone else has something to say, what would you say, first of all, like what drew you to the program? Your background is in communication, so what brought you to the program?
Uh, well, it was actually facilitated by a moment, in that one of my very longtime friends, I grew up in Halifax, and one of my roommates from my, early years in university, who lives in Yellowknife, had had a situation during the wildfires that were up
Mm,
there, and the entire town was evacuated. And he came to stay with me. And he really, for me, was my first sort of experience with a climate refugee.
mhm.
And that really hit. It hit hard. And it woke me to a completely different reality, that we are living in a climate future that is much more unpredictable. I just realized that my time in industry was limited, and I needed to rethink about what my priorities are. I don't have children, but I am thinking about future generations and the world we're leaving them, and where I choose to be in that conversation has facilitated my effort here
Yeah.
and my desire to participate in something bigger that will hopefully move the needle for everyone. But fundamentally, it was a rethink of and a new challenge to how I assumed our world worked. And
Yeah.
no, it's
Well,
not small.
yeah, not small, and thank you for sharing that. You know, that I think, you know, students coming into this program really are motivated by different things for sure, but I think that's a common motivation, is really wanting to contribute to, you know, a situation that we know we're all in and are differently impacted. And often there is a moment where it becomes real, either because you've experienced a wildfire or extreme storm or someone close to you has. And or there's something else that happens in the world that it really goes like, wow, this is here. And one of the things that we know about, you know, climate anxiety and climate grief and all these things that are now being talked about is that doing something, making a difference, having a way of contributing in what is a very challenging existential crisis is one path towards trying to stay healthy. So I think that's a common motivator. I'm looking at some other questions. How easy is the PLAR process for a military member? It's relatively easy on your end. What you would do is submit that as part of your application, and asking for PLAR for the courses. And then there would be an assessment of that. And that assessment, I will speak because I'm usually involved in it, probably in the case of military courses would be involve some reach back, because often I come from a background of designing and delivering the disaster and emergency management master's degree. And so we've had lots of military in that. And sometimes it's like, I have no idea what that is, describe it. So I know what the learning was. So the more you can offer on that front in terms of learning outcomes, like what were the learning outcomes for those courses, and you know, a description of the course, the more information you can provide, the easier the assessment is for that. And then, you know, we would get into what an assessment of what's relevant and then what that would count for, because courses are different lengths and have different expectations, etc., from graduate work. But we have done that with a number of students. There's also a question. Oh, you answered Amber's question. Never mind. Well, actually, in what your answer is a little yes and no. It doesn't, it will strengthen your application for sure. But if you decide to do the master's degree, we do actually look at PLAR as one option for gaining credit. It's not automatic, but in the McCall program, it was designed with PLAR in mind. So there's a category of options and pathways in the second year. It doesn't account for your diploma, but if you decide to do the master's degree in the second year, there is a 9-credit window that allows you, as I said, either to do a thesis or an internship or experiential learning or electives. And that's where these PLAR credits can come to bear and say, okay, this is worth 3 credits, so you only have to do 2 electives, or this is worth 6 credits and you only have to do 1 elective, etc. So they really can count for credit in that second year of your program. All right, I don't see any other questions, and you can ask them in the chat even as we move forward. But I know Ariana wants to help let you know what you do to apply. And first of all, I want to thank you, Idris, so much for sharing your insights. It's always helpful to have someone from the program. It's a different insight and a different perspective than, of course, for someone who's teaching in the program. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having
Over to
me.
you,
Pleasure to be here.
Ariana. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Robin. And yeah, thank you so much as well to you, Idris, for joining us. So valuable for folks to hear about the student experience as well. So let me just go ahead and share my screen again here, folks, and I will talk to you a little bit about how to apply. So if you are thinking of joining us in the program coming up, of course, we would love to have you. Just a few quick steps to consider if you are thinking about putting together an application. Of course, we have an online application fee. That is the first step. It is currently $136.69. And then we do ask, I know we were chatting a little bit about documents and things like that. So some supporting documents with your application. So things like official transcripts from previous post-secondary, detailed resume. So really going into detail about your work experience and life experience. Personal statement. It's a little bit of like a cover letter for a job, if you will, kind of saying, what do you hope to bring to the program? What do you hope to get from the program? And details, of course, on how to do all of this is on our website, and I'll be sharing that after. 2 letters of reference, so those can either be academic or professional in nature. And then there's also English language requirements to consider. More details for those again at ruralroads.ca. So moving right along here, some key dates. So if you are thinking of applying for either the MA or the Graduate Diploma in Climate Action Leadership, application deadline, I cannot believe it is almost January, but here we are, January 7th, 2025 is the application deadline for that. And then the start is in April 7th, 2025. So some things to consider there. We have some services, of course, that are available to you. Now, we were chatting a little bit about some services that we offer students, but services we also offer for your application process, things like financial aid and award services. So things like loans, bursaries, scholarships, other awards, student research scholarships, and emergency funding. Sometimes life happens, right? So we have all sorts of resources, and you can browse those on the section of our website. Enrollment services, my wonderful colleague Andrea is answering some things in the chat, popping in some links. Thank you so much, Andrea, for being here. Of course, we have enrollment services. They can be reached at learn.more@ruralroads.ca. Easy to remember there. If you have any questions, or if you want to give them a call, there's a number for local and toll-free for North America there on the screen. And they can really help you narrow down your program options, answer questions, or connect you with students as well. And at this point, that is all the slides I have to wrap us up here, but I do see we have some questions in the chat. I'm just scanning here quickly. Da, da, da. There's a question here. I'll pass to you, Robin. I'm sorry if this was covered. What are the dates for the full-time 2-week online requirement for 2025? And has this been decided yet for 2026? And is there an intake for this program every year?
Wow, I should have that. It's a reasonable question. I should have that, but I don't have the exact dates. There is a pre-course, it's not credit course, that sort of orients you to the program and to Moodle and student services, and you get your ID and all that sort of stuff in April. And then the 2-week learning intensive begins in May. I don't know the exact date this coming year, but the schedule, and maybe you can find this, Ariana or Andrea, the most recent schedule for 2025 should be posted on the website. I just don't have it sitting in front of me. That was one question. And what was the other question?
I think that is currently the only question that we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's early May, but I don't know the exact date. But we'll get you we'll put the link in the chat to the schedule. Okay, full-time, and 2026 again probably hasn't even been posted, but let's put the link to the official site in the chat, and then you can check it there. And I see Andrea's responded to Amber to give you a link to set up an enrollment advising appointment so you can talk about this program and other programs. The answer to you also, I think, is yes, but that sounds like for Mr. Ling, also speaking to an enrollment advisor. Is that true? Yeah, Ariana?
Yeah, I would say for any questions, if you have questions about, say, your specific application or situation, it would be best to book an appointment. And I know Andrea provided her booking link in the chat as well, so I can pass that along in our follow-up too if anybody wants to book a one-on-one. I know I found that helpful when I was coming to Rural Roads, so highly recommend that as well.
And you know, in terms of your reference letters, yes, you could, I'm sure, assuming use the same reference letters. A lot of the application would be the same or similar. There's maybe a different personal statement that you would write, but again, you could probably translate that. So welcome you to consider shifting into the graduate diploma. And if you need any help, you can talk to an enrollment advisor about that. Yeah. Great. There's the program schedule in the links there in the chat. And Andrea has just followed up by saying, yeah, she'd be happy to talk with you as well on that enrollment advisor link that she supplied earlier.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Robin, to you for giving us all the good program information. Of course, thank you to Andrea for her help as well. Thank you to Idris for his time. So very much appreciate it, folks. With that, we will sign off today because we're almost at 1 p.m. But again, if you have any questions, it's learn.more@ruralroads.ca, and then I'll provide those helpful links in my follow-up as well. So with that, thank you so much, folks. We hope, of course, we will see you in a webinar next time, and we'll see you in the program soon.
And the recording link will be shared with everyone here when we have it posted. So if there are things that you wanted to review from it, you can take a look at that too later. Thanks, everybody. Hope to meet some of you in online person in the program some time forward.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.